So before I start speaking about our open banking initiatives in Bahrain, I'd like to give the audience a little bit of an overview of Bahrain's financial services sector in general. Bahrain has long been recognized as a leading regional financial hub due to our solid and progressive regulations, due to our business-friendly ecosystem, and due to having a well-developed and diversified business financial services within the sector as well. The financial services sector is a key driver to the growth of our economy. It is in fact the second contributor to GDP, which following oil and gas, which is the largest contributor to GDP. In fact, the financial sector had driven around 16.7% to real GDP at the end of 2020. The financial services sector is also the single largest employer in Bahrain, with Bahrainis representing over 65% of the workforce. So bearing all this in mind, the Central Bank of Bahrain realizes that in order for us to maintain this position as a leading regional financial hub, we need to push our financial services sector towards digital transformation. We need to put in place the necessary regulatory pillars that will allow adoption of more innovation using financial technology and fintech, and to adopt emerging business models that will meet the evolving demands of the growing tech-savvy customer population, and also to spur more competition within the sector, which in turn will lead to more enhanced financial products and services in general. In fact, innovation and competition are really one of the two main pillars of Bahrain's economic vision 2030. With this vision in mind, the Central Bank of Bahrain was considered as a first mover in the region within the fintech space. Our journey dates back to 2014 when we issued special regulations on payment service providers to open up this payment industry, allowing for third parties to tap into this market segment and to create more competition and more innovation within the payment services as well. From then onwards, the Central Bank of Bahrain issued a host of different initiatives, from establishing a dedicated fintech and innovation unit to establishing the first onshore regulatory sandbox in Bahrain, and to issuing a number of different regulations, which brought us to the open banking regulations, which were first issued by the Central Bank of Bahrain in December 2018, after having conducted an industry consultation and consulting with our industry to get their views and their feedback on the draft regulations as well. So through the regulations that were issued in 2018, the Central Bank of Bahrain chose to take the approach of mandating all retail banks in the kingdom, both conventional as well as Islamic banks, to be fully compliant by the open banking rules by June of the next year of 2019. And when I say compliant, what I mean here is that we have mandated our retail banks by June of 2019 to have in place their open APIs and to be ready to open up their open APIs with any licensed third-party providers that will enable them to undertake account aggregation and payment initiation services to end customers. However, we have noticed that because we did not come up with standardized technical specifications of the APIs, that caused a little bit of a struggle for our banks to be able to comply with the open banking regulations in a consistent fashion. And therefore, after consulting with the industry again, the Central Bank of Bahrain in October of last year issued the first version of Bahrain's open banking framework. It is also known as version 1.0.0. In an effort to accelerate the adoption and compliance of open banking amongst all the open banking participants, namely the banks and the third-party licensed providers as well. Now, what the Bahrain Open Banking Framework is that it's really a set of standards and guidelines that assists our financial institutions and licensed TPPs to be able to adopt open banking in a consistent manner. The framework covers and provides technical standards when it comes to APIs. We've got a number of different API use cases, AISP use cases, payment initiation use cases, as well as essential services use cases. The framework also provides guidelines and standards revolving around user or customer experience, standards specifically targeted towards security, operational standards and guidelines, as well as providing the industry with a confluence tool. I just want to mention that the Bahrain Open Banking Framework will continue to develop and evolve with time through input from the industry and in line with global trends as well. So we at the Central Bank will be continuously and periodically reviewing those frameworks. We really believe as a central bank that open banking will enrich the financial services sector. Essentially what open banking does is that it, first of all, it empowers customers by providing them with the power to manage and access their financial data, which will in turn lead them to making more informed financial decisions. It will lead to increasing and enhancing financial literacy and will lead to enhancing as well financial inclusion. From another end, open banking will also provide a host of different opportunities for banks. As they interact with third-party providers and get to meet the evolving needs of the customers, open banking will be a new stream of revenue for banks by enabling those banks to come up with new products and services that are not being met under the traditional banking umbrella today. So we at the Central Bank are very committed to open banking, and we are currently in the beginning of our journey. As I mentioned before, we have currently only mandated retail banks, but it is within our vision and within our plan to slowly roll out open banking to wholesale banks, to cater to SME clients as well. And we also have a plan to opening it up to the wider financial services sector in the future, and offering open finance as well. Now, in terms of the challenges that we faced, I think let me, Rashid, speak about the main 3 challenges that come to my mind when I think of open banking, and these are not necessarily just relevant to Bahrain, but these are challenges that I believe are faced globally by regulators. If I was to name the 3 biggest challenges, I would say the first would be data privacy. The second would be the lack of awareness on the opportunities of open banking amongst banks, as well as having being burdened with legacy infrastructure. And the third, I would say, having a consistent set of API and technical specifications and standards. When I speak of data privacy issues, at the first glance, open banking may seem more of a threat than an opportunity. I mean, any cybersecurity criminal today would dream of gaining access to customers' banking and financial data, and to be able to use that data for illicit activities. So it's very essential and very important that regulators are very well acquainted with data and how to protect data from leakage to cyber criminals. As a result, regulators must be very aware when they form their regulatory frameworks on open banking. They must have in place a very balanced framework that will not stifle innovation. However, at the same time, does not compromise the security and safety of people and financial institutions' data as well. For example, in Bahrain, our open banking regulations are governed by Bahrain's personal data protection law. We have specific provisions within our regulations on security, on risk management, on validating the third-party providers, and our recently issued framework also provides more consistent security guidelines and standards as well. Going back to my second point on banks' lack of awareness on the opportunities of open banking and banks being burdened with legacy infrastructure, I think that many banks globally, they're not really keeping abreast of the developments on a global basis, specifically when it comes to emerging transformative business models and technologies. This really results in a lack of understanding of those emerging business models, which banks may then in turn perceive them as more of a threat rather than an opportunity. Failing to acknowledge the business opportunities that these emerging business models may bring to them, to the banks. And this may lead to those banks initially being resistant to opening up to open banking. And this is something we initially witnessed in Bahrain, and I'm sure a lot of the other regulators globally have also witnessed, which is just a natural progression. Within the banking realm, I think a lot of the traditional banks today are also stuck with legacy infrastructure and technology, which is not up to par. And that really requires those banks to make substantial investments to upgrade their existing IT infrastructures to be able to meet open banking requirements. So that again is another kind of challenge that we have witnessed in the market as well. The third challenge, which I mentioned, was having the lack of consistent or standardized specifications in terms of technical specifications as well as user experience specifications. When we first launched our regulations back in 2018, we did not issue the any specifications in terms of like API, user experience. We started our journey by requiring our banks to follow the UK's technical specifications when it comes to forming or designing their APIs. However, we soon then realized that this was a challenge that was causing a lot of our banks to have delays in complying with our open banking regulations, and therefore we took it upon ourselves as the central bank to then consult with the industry and to put in place a specific framework for open banking, specifying all those standardized technical specifications, user experience specifications, governance specifications as well. In fact, the Central Bank of Bahrain is one of the first regulators globally to take on this responsibility and to put in place a framework that provides those technical standards as well. So this is in summary like our journey in Bahrain when it comes to open banking, and a quick highlight on the different challenges. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions from either my fellow panelists or from the audience as well.